Hey there, welcome in that new tutorial regarding rendering Golem Crowd within Redshift in 3ds Max. So for this to work, you'll need to have Golem 7.3.10 or above. If you are using any previous version, you'll have some issues with shading assignment. You also need to have Redshift for Maya installed and obviously Redshift for 3ds Max. So I created a scene here which is ready to render. I exported the cache and this is how it renders within Redshift. So I have all my materials, everything working properly, so on and so forth. So if we want to transfer that procedural rendering to 3ds Max, we're going to use the Redshift proxy technology. So it means that first we'll need to select every node we want to export as a Redshift proxy. So I want to select my crowd. So my crowd is going to be stored in a procedural manner in the cache proxy node. I also want to select my shaders. So here my shaders are going to be attached to my look dev character, but you can also have some proxy geometry on which you just assign a bunch of shaders on the different faces. The shaders which are owned by that character are the same than the one defined onto your character file within Golem. So anytime you're creating a Golem character and some geometry assignment, each mesh is connected to a shading group, and you want to and that shading group has some specific names, body SG, so on and so forth, and you want to export a mesh which has the exact same shader attached to it. And just to make it easier to figure where are my characters within 3ds Max, I'm just going to export some geometry as well. It will, because there are proxies based on bounding box, and my characters will not appear within the bounding box system. So I'm just gonna push some geometry so I'll know more or less where are my crowds and where are my characters. So I select the three of those. I go into Redshift, proxy, and export. So I'm gonna export this within. Let's export this within here. That directory here. Okay, I'm gonna create a new directory for that. Let's call that rs export. Within the options, I want to export a Redshift proxy file type, and I want to make sure to export a sequence which goes from my start frame to my last frame of my crowd. Notice that frame 1 doesn't include any crowd, so that usually starts at frame 2, but well, we can just go away with that, so on. So let's name that sequence Golem Loco. So it's gonna parse every single frame and export my procedural calls for every single frame. So just a side note about procedurals, anytime you're going to change your simulation, let's say you had more characters, you had more behaviors, you had some layout operation, you don't need to re-export the Redshift proxy, because the Redshift proxy just remember the parameters of the crowd. But if you overwrite your cache again and again, it's always going to point to the same cache, so it will update in 3ds Max. So let's go in my 3ds Max session. I'm going to create a Redshift dome light first, probably, and then I'm going to create a proxy in my scene. Let's put it where you want, and once you have it, you can see here it has an attribute. The first attribute it has is a file path. So I'm going to point to my sequence I just exported. Here we go, rs export, and take the first frame. Great. If you want this to update, you can change your frame here. And also, if you want the interface to update, you can see that no materials are recorded here. But if you uncheck this and recheck, it updates the interface, and now you can see the different materials. So speaking about the materials, so those are the materials which have been exported. So the materials for the plane, that one here. And also the material for my characters, so all the the clothes, the body, so on and so forth. So all good. If I take a look at my Redshift proxy, we can see that the bounding box is not really what we expected, mostly because 3ds Max is Z up, and Maya is Y up. So if we want to see our characters properly, we probably need to reorient this had a 90-degree axis. And also keep in mind that the x-axis is reversed within 3ds Max and Maya, so my character will have a x mirror So you can just rescale your proxy, scale it with a -1 on the x-axis to fix this. Great. Let's see if we are about to render this. Let's see how it looks like. Let's check first if I'm actually using Redshift as my default renderer. I'm not. Great. So let's go back to Redshift and press render and see what we get. So, oh yeah, and it tells us the first frame is not available, or maybe what frame is not, yeah, okay, we are on the frame 1, and as I just told you, frame 1 is not exported, so we need to move in time. Let's move this a bit to the side. So we can see the plane, which is good news, and as soon as we render, now we'll get characters, so excellent. Just to make my point regarding cache update, let's say I increment the number of characters. Let's say I provide more crowd and I export my cache at the same location. So now I have 25 characters instead of 9. If I go in 3ds Max and I press render, now I've got my 25 characters. So no need to re-export the Redshift proxy all the time. If you were about to maybe change the cache location or you relocated any file, you'll have to do it, else don't bother. Great, so as you can see here, it's taking advantage of the same material we've been exported within the proxy. But let's say you want to do your look dev within 3ds Max. So let's go back into Maya and let's re-export this. So let's export just the cache proxy and the plane this time. Go into Redshift proxy export and go into rs export no material, and once again name this Golem Loco. Export this for every single frame. Now I can jump into maybe another session which has a dome light and a Redshift proxy. Let's point that Redshift proxy to the same location then the one we've just exported in. Here, export nomad. Great. And let's bring this later. And play a frame. So I reoriented that proxy already. If we render, now we'll get our characters being not shaded at all and plenty of warning messages through the render log saying that it cannot find the shading group, manmd, close flag, etc, etc, etc. Because we don't have those shaders anymore being stored into the rs file. So now we need to bring them in our scene. So what I just did is I just created a Redshift material. I name it manmd top hair sg, which is one of the shader which is missing from the list. So this is that one. This is the one for the character hair. And here it's in the scene, but as it's not assigned to any object, Redshift kind of ignore it and does not convert it into his scene file format. So if you want it to be, assigned and existing and converted and available for the crowd, we'll have to create some proxy geometry here. Let's say we create like a box. We don't really care what it is. And we're going to assign that proxy to the selection. As soon as we do this, you'll see that the manmd top hair sg is now part of the scene materials. And if we go closer to the crowd and render again, hopefully we should get a character getting some blue hair. So now that shader exists, is part of the scene, and you can control how it looks like. You can use the user attributes, Redshift user attributes to do shading diversity, and all the diversity which is offered by Golem. You just have to go back to our documentation regarding shading diversity, and this is exactly the same way it works within Redshift. When you go into the Redshift maps, you've got user data, and you can fetch those user data that we are attaching to every single crowd character and every single mesh to make color diversity or texture switching. Okay, so hope that helps, and see you into the next video.